Congresswoman Melissa Dean voted for the bill today, has some issues with it, but voted for it just the same. Congresswoman, given all those dangers that the good judge here warned us about, why did you vote for it?
Well, first of all, I only heard a little bit, and I can't see you, so I wasn't sure who it was that was on a rant about the legislation.
Well, our Judge Napolitano was essentially saying that this violates the Constitution.
Well, first of all, I did also have concerns, which is why I voted against that one portion about preemptive divestiture. But first of all, he talked about it applying to any publicly held firm. That's just incorrect. It would only apply to those financial services institutions that have already been designated by a vote of a council of systemic risk regulators that have been identified as systemically risky, the types of organizations that can reverberate through the system if they fail.
But it's this government bailout we had. I understand, ma'am, but it's this government entity or this government handpicked group, individual, whatever, that has deemed what among our financial companies could be that risk. So ahead of time, determining the haves and the have-nots, and I'm wondering if that's a slippery slope that you're waging here, because you're getting into healthy companies' business and then pre-breaking them up if you think it's going to be risky, right?
Well, you know, I think it's been on your show and other shows we've heard people talk about a bailout nation. This dissolution authority, which is the broader bill that we're talking about, we were looking at one piece of it, is exactly the anti-bailout bill, because it won't allow companies to become too big to fail. It will allow companies to be identified that could have systemic risk and create reverberations through the system.
I understand where you're coming from, but how would it compel them to hire workers? How would it compel them to hire workers when they know that the government is going to police how big they can get or not get?
Well, first of all, I don't know why you would force someone, again, talking about government intervention, to hire workers if they're failing or struggling. We would want them to get their balance sheet in order so they don't become unhealthy.
You're judging they're struggling before they're struggling. No. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, because you're judging that they're struggling.
I'm talking about the bill you asked me to come talk about.
No, I'm asking you this question. Are they struggling? At what point do you intervene and say, now you're struggling?
Well, first of all, what we'd be doing is there will be measurements in place to look at institutions through holding companies that are financial institutions, some of which were not looked at in the past, so that we can appreciate what their capital requirements are, and there will be increased capital requirements for those organizations that could create the type of systemic risk that required government intervention in the past, so that we can avoid it in the future.
All right, so you are saying there are some instances you don't want them to get too big to fail, right?
Well, and to your point, or the gentleman that was on earlier, I couldn't hear who was speaking, there was something about how this is going to cost taxpayers. This doesn't cost taxpayers, because this will be paid for by a fund for those financial institutions that could pose systemic risk, and they will be paying into it the same way, you know, banks pay into the FDIC as depository institutions, and then the FDIC is there to dissolve those entities when they fail. This same sort of dissolution authority will be available, and unlike what was done in the past, if a company fails, those executives are fired. Their shareholders lose money. Exactly what this gentleman was speaking for, that we need to have to
do you see what I'm getting at here? I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing, and I know your intentions are good, and I know you mean well. I know those who voted for this mean well. I'm just saying it is very dangerous. It's not about meaning well. It's exactly what we need to do to protect taxpayer money. You just said you had the heebie-jeebies about it when you voted for it.
It's very specific.
Congresswoman, you just said you had reservations about it. I'm telling you, Congresswoman.
Okay, Mr. Cavuto, there's the bill, and there was one amendment. They're two different things. But the dissolution authority that we're talking about, I don't have reservations about at all.
Congresswoman, you're talking about financial. No, I know. I just want to be clear on this. You're talking about financial entities, some of whom are not taking a dime from the government, but the government is still going to dictate when it deems their behavior is getting risky. The same government that runs up deficits and debts, like I do calories at a bakery store. I just think it's a little hypocritical, that's all.
Well, I think if you want to say taxpayers shouldn't bail people out, we want to eliminate an implied guarantee to those institutions, which is what happened in the past and we can't allow to repeat again.
But you're going to make a bigger mess. What if you make a bigger mess? What if your cure is worse than the disease?
How would you do that?
Because you are taking apart institutions that might be perfectly healthy and pre-slicing them before they've even shown a sign of trouble.
You mean kind of like the companies that were AAA rated and did fail and did cost taxpayers $700 billion, or at least in terms of loans, some of which are now being paid back. That's exactly where we were before.
And the government, wait. And the government is going to be better at deciding someone's fiscal stability than the industry itself. That's what you're saying.
These will be done by a council of regulators that have industry expertise.
Congresswoman, that would be like me. That would be like me taking over the Jacqueline fitness centers. You don't want to go there. I'm not the guy for that. Congress and Washington isn't the group. Isn't the group to supervise?
Those institutions are not.
They're the very institutions that caused this. You are putting the fox in charge of the henhouse.
I disagree with you. I think this is exactly the right way to move forward.
Right.
And my constituents who've seen their prices of their homes fail and fall, that they've seen their savings diminished because there was not a system in place to properly dissolve those entities that have failed and hold them and their executives and their shareholders accountable and left the taxpayers on the hook, that can't continue. And I think you and I agree on that point.
Congresswoman, thank you for coming.
Thanks so much.